Welcome to the Learning Can't Wait podcast, a Full Mind production. At Full Mind, our vision is to ensure every child has access to an exceptional education. Each episode, we will be joined by pathfinders within and around the education space who are bringing about transformational change on behalf of deserving students. I am your host, Hayley Spira-Bauer. Welcome back, everybody, to the Learning Can't Wait podcast. I am so eager to introduce and actually interview this next guest. Not only may you know her from many speaking engagements on a topic that is very hot in education right now, and for good reason, but I think you'll be excited to hear about the work she's doing. If you're not already familiar, we have Amanda Bickerstaff, the CEO and co-founder of AI for Education. Amanda, welcome.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here with you.
You're my favorite type of guest. Do you know why?
Why? No clue.
Because you probably didn't hear about the podcast before, but you really love sharing your message, and it's an important message. And so you asked me if you could come join us, which was honestly a gift because I was planning on asking you at the same conference that we first met. And I love the opportunity to interview folks who sort of are spreading the gospel about the changes that are happening in education right now and the way that we can equip our schools to be prepared for that. So I'm so honored that you are excited about the podcast, and I'm also beyond honored to have the opportunity to interview you amongst your extremely busy schedule.
Well, it's very nice to be able to talk to people about what we're doing. And it's, like I was talking about before, it's been a little while since I've been able to do something like this because I'm so on the road doing the work in schools and districts and associations that it's kind of interesting. I'm so in the world of it that I don't get to talk about it from a higher level very often anymore. So I'm excited to be here with you and talk about generative AI and education and all the things.
Awesome. Well, let's dive right in. So my first question for you is, how did you come to be the personal and professional version of yourself?
That's a good question. I mean, I was talking about this actually this week. I was down in Catawba County doing a train the trainer. We were having lunch with some of the great folks down there, and you know, it's been really interesting to be in a position where we built a business kind of accidentally, like, a couple of posts on LinkedIn and a website and a prompt library. And then now, we're a full-fledged brand that people trust, I think, which is one of our best things that we've been able to build. So we're talking about how that works. And I always joke that if I ever did a TED talk, it would be do it the hardest possible way. And the reason is that a couple of things. Number one is that I've always been a little to the left or right. I was never like everyone around me. Like I was good at school, but like frustrated my teachers because they wanted me to stop doing so many things. Or, when I was working for people, I often would, have trouble kind of moderating what now really works as a founder and CEO. And so it's been really interesting. I've had a habit of trying things I've never done before. Like I've done so many jobs where I'd never done the thing. Like I started as a teacher in the Bronx. I then hopped into all different types of things, and I've never taken a business class. I had never done a keynote before this year. Like there's been such an interesting kind of moment of just trying new things and partnering with people that know more than I do to be able to kind of build expertise and experience. But then also I really think that struggling to find my place where what makes me who I am was a positive and not always like a conflict. And so, when you see the world differently, like it kind of makes sense sometimes to build an organization around that with people that understand and want to work with that kind of approach. And so it's been a real learning journey. I've learned so much around, how to manage people, how to build a business, how to interact and engage with people, but also like why I think this moment in time has worked so well for me of like finally kind of being in the right place, right time. And I think I'm the right person to help really, support education to navigate this really, really, difficult and scary time, as well as this like opportunistic time that we have. So yeah, it's been a strange road, but I feel like I finally am in the right place, which is really nice.
What a cool way to describe how the person that you always were helped you become the person that you are. I feel I haven't heard someone on this podcast or even in the world talk about that in a long time, just how their authentic differences really serve to benefit them later stages of their life. And I don't really have a lot of kids that listen to this, to the best of my knowledge, but perhaps some of the students from Montgomery County ESC, because they just recently came on an episode. But if they're listening, maybe that's a nice comfort for them about what the future may hold. Can you talk a little bit more, though, about the vision for AI for education? Like, what is it intended to be?
Yeah, and I think that we're at this stage, we're willing to do whatever the education system needs, to be honest. Like we started, like I said, with a couple LinkedIn posts and a website with a prompt library. And a prompt library, if you don't know, is the essentially like really, really well done questions you can ask generative AI chatbots that get to the best outputs possible. And so, we started, I think I started as a public good. Like what can I do to help? Like it's a difficult, like it's not intuitive, it's different. Like what can I help do? As I had been a CEO of an education technology company in Australia and then got pretty burnt out. So I'd been been traveling around the world for 6 months and came back to the US and going through my own journey of what happens next. And so I was like, okay, this is unique. I could just see it in my head. Like the opportunities were so large, but it was so different than anything that happened before that I just saw it like as a crystal moment of like how much support would be needed. And it's really fascinating because I think that at that time it was kind of clear that there were a lot of like big conversations about like, you know, kids will stop learning and it's only going to be bad, or like it's going to change the world tomorrow and like get on the bus or get run over. And there was a really missing part about like balance and like practical application. So being who I am as a human, like I really struggle with any things that are not all the way down to what you could actually use. So I was like, okay, we're gonna do a couple of things. And at that point, again, just how do you talking about it? How do you start thinking about it? How can we take complex ideas and make them more reasonable for people that are not technical to understand? But then it became like super, super clear that there was a much bigger need, because I think that the people that would usually be diving into like implementation and PD and support were like, "Ooh, we can build with technology for the first time ever, really, and do it more cheaply." And so there was a really big push into, and a continued push into building generative AI education tools and ed tech tools. And then very little focus on like, what does a school do when like academic integrity is a question, or teachers are starting to use these tools without support. So we then it then became very clear in less than 6 weeks, really. I mean, from April 17th, when I launched the website, to our first school in June before the end of the school year here in New York City, that there was much more that needed to be done. So we started, I incorporated in July, and my co-founder started in August. And we started doing PD and started doing workshops and professional development, free course and all these things. And what's happened since then is it was like public good, PD, and now it's like change management, AI guidance and policy. Literally today, we will be sharing Chicago Public Schools AI guidance that we partnered with them to write. It really has moved quite quickly. And I think the next stage of like what we want to do is really start to create systems that are practical for school systems to create the change management process, to start building AI literacy, responsible adoption, but then also reframing assessment, learning opportunities for students, because that's the next stage. And we want to be able to help ed tech, ed tech education be wherever they are, where they're first getting started, all the way to start thinking about what really this moment in time is going to mean for kids.
That is a really exciting trajectory in a short amount of time.
Very short.
That is awesome. No, you mentioned during some of your answer there that there's some excitement about AI, but there's also fear. So can you talk about fear is often rooted in misconceptions. What misconceptions about AI in education do you frequently encounter?
I mean, I think the first one is I was using a brand new metaphor yesterday with our women in AI education community, which is this idea of an iceberg. And the iceberg right now is the tip of the iceberg with generative AI in education is AI is for cheating. it is like the strongest rhetoric, the loudest rhetoric, and it is what everyone can kind of agree that's a potential issue, and it's on the top of the water. And underneath that iceberg is like all the opportunity and all the actual potential risks that go way beyond academic integrity issues. So things like students' artificial intimacy or deep fakes, and then the positives around agency, autonomy, personalization, productivity gains, et cetera. And so I think that the biggest thing that we're trying to combat is that, first of all, from research, there is not more cheating now. Kids are cheating differently. And so things like Chegg was a cheating tool, first ed tech organization to lose all of their value because kids were not paying $20 a month for Chegg. They're paying $20 a month for GPT-4. And so that's number one. And number two is that kids cheat for all kinds of reasons. And sometimes they cheat because we put them into positions where they cannot succeed. And so it is a much more complex piece. And while there is extreme risk to students, like what has made us uniquely human and what has made learning uniquely human, because now we have the calculator for the humanities that can do not just a sine curve, but can also do an essay, a discussion post, all of those things that we're assessing students on, that there is big shifts and need to have better conversations about the root cause of what academic integrity really means, as well as how we assess students to ensure that we are truly assessing what is important for them to be assessed on. And I think that's number one. But because of that iceberg, we're all like, if we cannot get past that, we are going to not ever get to the two areas of potential, like the big areas of potential gain and risk. And like, so we're trying really, really hard to get people to step back and be able to have conversations about opportunity, about all of the things that could be good, with time and the technology becoming better, more reliable, and then AI literacy being something that we prioritize in our schools, as well as like the deeper social emotional impact of a technology that can mimic human, like not just human conversation, but emotion and even like images, video, and sound. Like, I don't know if you've read, Hayley, but the model card from GPT-4o has a voice component, and it started mimicking the person's voice. And it was not, like that is an uncanny valley and a potential enormous risk. And so I think that is our ultimate goal. We have an opportunity to like pull back the waterline to have a better conversation, but it has to be something that we all just stop the chaos and the noise so much and actually get to the tactical part of this.
To use your nautical theme, just one step further here of the iceberg and the waterline, the ship's also sailing. Like the boat has left the harbor. AI is happening whether we embrace it or not. And it's much like the conversation for me around safe sex and drug usage. You can ignore what your students are doing outside of school, your kids are doing, your children are doing outside of school, but it's still likely going to happen. So in my mind, it's better to equip ourselves with the tools to help our children encounter this technology and this reality, because they will do it without our consent either way, with access to any form of a smartphone, smart device, etc.
Yeah. Let me give you an anecdote from literally this week. We're doing in North Carolina, we're doing a train the trainer, and someone calls me over and she's like, I was working with a third grader, and he was like, have you met Al? And she's like, who is Al? It's like, Al's on Snapchat. And it's like, she's like, he's like the number one, he's super cool. And she's like, can you show me? And she opened his phone, and it was AI. It was a Snapchat AI that he had named Al and thought was a human. And so like, this is when you talk about what is happening, like I find it very interesting, and it's always kind of funny. Like I talk a lot about not waiting even for K-5, and I've had a couple of principals and district leaders come up to me and say I felt seen by that because we weren't going to do it, and the reason being is that there's research from like in the UK that 40% of 7 to 12-year-olds online have used AI already, and that's Snapchat AI. And, those are the moments where, like, if you think that we can somehow ban something like this, which we have tried, the best way to talk about it is it's not adopted technology. We're not going to go through adoption strategies. What we're going to be going through is an arrival technology, which means that we are in a reactive space and it is already arrived. And there is no way to stem that because generative AI is going to be a part of every technology that we use down to our phones, whether we want to or not. And the idea of opting out is going to be more and more difficult, and at a point, if you are at all using technology, impossible.
Heck yes. Also, I mean, we know this from everything. If you wait till middle school or high school to amend students, let's say, literacy issues because they don't have phonemic awareness or phonic capacity, or they're not decoding properly, you've waited too long. That's why we have such an emphasis on early elementary literacy or early childhood literacy, because that has bounding effects for the rest of their lives. I can imagine the same idea applies here. One more point that I want to ask about regarding these kind of sticky points, and then I want to dive into the good stuff, the innovation, things that get you excited. But one of my best friends is a writer, and she has written about the ethical concerns of AI and also who's speaking up about this and how we can prevent this. And it's really interesting content. I'm wondering from your vantage point, how AI for education is thinking about these ethical and responsible ideas related to the way we use AI, the way we think about AI, and also the future of the development of AI.
I mean, people are like, can you do a session on like ethics? And we're like, every session we do is on ethics. And so like you cannot get out of a session with us of any type without it having an ethical component, because artificial intelligence writ large and not just generative are, systems that are created based on human data, and human data in itself, there are ethical considerations of how it's been trained and created in terms of bias and like that piece, but also like what we give up to be a part of those systems, that axiom if it's free or the product is real. And so like there's ethical components on both sides, but we talk about 3 ethical mindsets. The first ethical mindset, and I'm going to say this to everybody listening, I don't mean this for like kids or just school teachers or leaders. If you are an ed tech professional or whoever you are listening today, because Hayley's so great, I'm sure there are a lot of you, is like, this is for everyone. And the first one is transparency. And transparency of use is so important. Our first ever school that was willing to partner with us is Moses Zaheda School, Thomas Edison in Queens. Went to school there, became a teacher, now principal. And he always liked to joke that like a lot more people in your school is using AI. They're just unwilling to tell you, like this is being hidden. And that's back in June of last year. And we definitely agree with that. And what we're finding is that if you are transparent in your use by disclosing the appropriate and responsible ways that you're using it, if you model that at any stage of any organization, it becomes something in which it is something we can talk about without fear of stigma and or discomfort. And so, for example, you talked about the Chicago guidance is coming out. We literally put we had 3 weeks to turn around a document that was pretty technical into something a little bit more guidebooky. And that's a short period of time. And so what we did is we used Claude, which is our favorite generative AI tool for writing, and said at the top, we used Claude to create some boilerplate for this. All of the information is based on what we did before, like our unique conversations, the work that's been done. But in order to ensure that we met the timeline, we have used the system this way. Chicago didn't come back to us and say, how dare you? This isn't ours, like nothing like that. And in fact, what was great is that they included a disclosure in the actual guidelines. So we modeled it for them, and then they actually included it, and they're modeling it for all their teachers and leaders.
I love that. Full disclosure, I use ChatGPT regularly for the podcast. I always ask, I put in inputs. I know my prompts that I use to get really deep questions about the interviewees that I have, and I use that all the time as a framework. But I would have no qualms telling anybody that I do that, because I think it's been normed in the communities that I run in to be transparent.
But also you have trust. Yeah, but you have trust though, right? And some of this is trust building, right? Like the use of it. Like if you are using AI to like offload something that would be important, then maybe we'd be less comfortable with that. And I think that that's where that transparency is really important. Like, do you have it do everything, or do you have it refine, brainstorm, make it all in like now all your questions are going to be in like sarcastic 7th grade slang, like whatever, like that is going to be the places that we want to talk about. And because then you do it, and then people around you will feel more comfortable. Number two is going to be around verification. These tools are the worst they've ever been today and yesterday, and will continue to be pretty bad. There's literally research that came out this week that even the frontier models are making stuff up all the time, whether it's in medical reviews. Like there was a piece that came out this week that like only about 35% of content is truly true outside of what's on Wikipedia. If you ask a generative AI tool something that would not be found on Wikipedia, that the accuracy rate goes down about 35%. And even something like Claude gets up to about 75%, but they refuses to answer a significant amount of content questions. And so that's because Wikipedia is one of the main data sets that these tools are trained on. And so verification of outputs for bias, and the only way you see bias is if you're looking for it, because it's very easy to not see that unless you're directly comparing outputs based on demographics, et cetera. Unless it's like image generation, then it's very easy to see the bias. It's almost impossible not to. The second is hallucinations or those mistakes. And the third is going to be knowledge cutoffs, where it just actually like doesn't know stuff because it wasn't in its training data set. So verification always, if you get something wrong, ChatGPT is not going to be sued. You are going to be sued or fined or whatever that may be. And the last thing is like the idea of originality. We are going to have different conversations about what is truly original, and that where we are now, what is capable with technology, like literally with Claude, again, you can create an interactive game with one sentence with no technical background, artifacts, try it out, super cool. But like, is that really my game? Or is that like a game that like Claude created that I like gave a button, you know? But if I take that game and I make it interactive and fun and I add directions, and I have like an entire, ecosystem around it, and it's on my website, and like when does that actually become mine? And so I think that those are like the three ethical mindsets we talk about: that transparency, verification, and then that idea of augmentation or originality.
So tactical. I know you said at the beginning that you really love to get to the tactical because that's what people ultimately want. Philosophy is awesome. And we all are, if we're talking to educators here primarily, we need to know about our next step. Like, what are we doing with the information Amanda's sharing here tomorrow? So let's talk a little bit about schools. What has you really excited? Obviously, you just told us a little bit about CPS. You told us about a school in Queens. Tell me what's like something that happened to you in the past couple of weeks that's like getting you amped for school year 24-25 and how schools are thinking about AI.
So I think that I'm just going to call it like it is right now. The technology isn't that good yet for true organizational change. I'm just going to this is like the McDonald's example of a $17 billion company can't get 100 kiosks to take your order correctly. Like, there is a big place here of individual productivity and or creativity gains that I think is really important. And so if you think that, like, when you say like things I'm excited about is like AI literacy focus, areas of focus. I'm excited about some systems starting to build bespoke tools to try out. I'm excited about people that are working with students of special needs and disabilities that are creating accessible formats of like giving kids a voice and or ability to create with these technologies. I get excited about teachers being willing to be creative in ways that we have not incentivized in decades, if ever. Like the idea for, give that example of, I talked about the slang, we have a rubric prompt that like, it's like gets you a pretty good rubric, but we're like, don't stop there. If it was going to take you 45 minutes, it took you 2, put 10 minutes back in to make it kind of fun for your students. So literally we had some teachers, one made a sarcastic rubric in on the progressive era, in the language of the progressive era. So it was like an abomination to academics was abomination to academia was number 1 out of 4, which is hysterical. And then the second one was like a 7th grade rubric in slang, and it said like bruh all the way through it. It was like hysterical. And so the idea of like that creativity and that engagement is really, really high. We are at like we have like some areas in which we think there's still some time, like student facing chatbots, and there's some time in which these tools need to become more sophisticated, that we're not like super jazzed on, especially since AI literacy has not been developed in a lot of places that are actually starting to apply this. But I do think that we're like really hopeful with, the next stages of artificial intelligence, of seeing, bots that can reason more and have pedagogy and all those things that are missing now. And that the idea of individualization and personalization will become more and more possible. But right now, we're excited about students that are getting AI literacy training, parental support, responsible adoption support, and then using generative AI to meet them where they are when they need it, like, on demand. Like, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm doing an essay. My teacher, if I call my teacher or wake up my parent, they're going to be pissed at me. I'm going to run this through a generative AI tool in a responsible manner, get feedback to improve it, and then feel more confident the next day I go into classroom, is something that I think is becoming more and more an opportunity, especially for those students that have that AI literacy background.
There are so many applications as it relates to personalization that have me very much like in the same headspace as you are and kind of light up the same way you talk about this example here. Like it gives me a lot of hope for providing more personalized learning for students and equipping teachers with more tools to be able to meet their students' needs, even though they're only one person, sometimes in a room with 35 children. So something that I get excited about as well.
I had a teacher recently, like I think it was this week, that has 60 students in a classroom, 60, 60.
That is so wild to me. I just got off a call this morning with someone in which I used 70 as a random number. I was like, but no class would ever have that many. Well, apparently I was a little bit high, but not too high.
Yeah, no, it was wild. She's someone that is an early adopter and is using these tools to help her. But like, yeah, she has 60 students in the classroom.
Wow. Amanda, I have a standard last question, which, by the way, this time has flown. I looked up at the clock and couldn't believe that we have really wrapped at our 30-minute mark here. And I feel utterly shocked and also not surprised at all because you are an incredibly eloquent
Oh, you're very
conversationalist and
nice.
storyteller, and it really has me engaged, and I'm sure our listeners too. But my question that I standardly ask is, what advice would you give a teacher starting their career today? And I'm going to tweak it for you though.
I'm
I'm going
ready.
to tweak it to what advice would you give an educator who has not yet embraced generative AI and other forms of AI in their classroom, but are thinking about it?
I mean, I think that what works so well in our approach is that we don't go into this saying that everyone needs to be an AI expert, or you need to go full bore, or even use the word embrace. Like, we instead say, let's create a safe space for people to learn, work through their own fears and misconceptions, and then find value for themselves. Because what we do is, like, we talk about, like, my commitment I ask for everyone in one of our trainings is to be open to listening, trying, and failing. Like, I want people to fail in a safe space, because no, like, I have seen so many people say that I've used these tools. And we did an AP, I did like the first ever AP generative AI thing was at their conference a couple of weeks ago, and supposed to have like 50 people. We had 300 people in a 200-person room, and like 80% of the people raised their hand and said, I use generative AI. And then I showed them like what's possible, and literally people were gasping, like, not like, no joke. And like there was a guy clapping and the whole thing, because even those that think they've used it are most likely not using these technologies in a meaningful way, because they're not intuitive, and the companies are not spending the time building out user experiences that help them understand what it is and what it isn't and how it works. And so I think that this idea of like, find your partner, find your opportunity, whether it's us or someone else, and then just try to use these tools, knowing that like the more you use them and the more that you're willing to kind of try new things and be creative and learning a little bit about prompting, is going to mean that the things that you can do with technology already outstrip anything you could have done before as a non-technologist. And I always joke with people, they do their first prompt and I'm like, you're a software engineer now, because when you do use a prompt, you're actually building with technology in a way that had been very like required 10 years of experience and syntax and all those things. And so what I'd say is like, come with a growth mindset, find the right partner. Like, and I do believe that partnering right now is really important, whether that's an early adopter or someone that's just willing to do a study with you. And then just build your capacity and be open to like like that kind of idea of like, where can I go with this? That, AI for education does not exist to like just build AI literacy or to do PD or whatever, or build guidance. We exist because we believe that with responsible adoption and the right support, schools can be better. We can actually have a better school experience, not just for students, but for staff and teachers and leaders and caregivers. Doesn't mean necessarily right now we have a lot of work we have to do, but if we do it in an intentional and thoughtful and growth mindset way, we have a real opportunity to move past this industrial model that has refused to move in 100 years into something that actually can prepare students for a world that is greatly changing at a pace we have never seen before. And off that soapbox.
I was going to say, that's like the most mic drop end I've ever had. Amanda.
Soapbox over.
This is amazing. No, podcast is over. Anything I say after that will be totally valueless. Like that was epic, epic. Wow, Amanda, I was in awe of you before I met you. I'm even more in awe of you now. Thank you so much for the work you're doing. I'm so excited for listeners to hear this episode and to continue following your career. I so appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. Thanks, Hayley.
And thank you to everybody who joined us. Thanks for listening to the Learning Can't Wait podcast. If you like what you heard, please rate, review, and share this episode. Be the first to know when we have a new episode by subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to be a guest on the show or have a suggestion for an episode, email us at podcast@fullmindlearning.com.